Good evening to you, Chris.
Glad to be here, Chris. Thank you.
So we saw quite a fiery Joe Biden yet again. He's been more aggressive and assertive in his recent speeches. What did you make of the tone that we saw from the president tonight?
Yeah, this is the very combative, feisty Biden that we've seen a lot of this summer. I think, the tone of this was interesting in that he kept talking about political power, kept saying that, we have the power to do something about this movement that threatens American democracy. We have the power to vote. We have the power to take action. And that's actually a theme that he hit a lot during his campaign. If you think back to his the first presidential debate against Trump, at one point he looked at the camera and said, "Folks at home, you have the power to stop this. If you vote for me, if you vote to cast him out of office, his power over our politics goes away." And I think this is very much in keeping with that.
I found it interesting that he tried to draw this firm line between the Republican Party and those Republicans on what he's calling this extremist side of the MAGA movement. Who do you think that message was targeted at?
I think there he's speaking to Republicans who are uncomfortable with Trump, have been uncomfortable with Trump from the start, folks who might have told themselves in 2016, well, it's better than Hillary Clinton, and he'll get us tax cuts and he'll get us judges. And Biden's saying to those folks, look, that's not what's going on here. This isn't about normal policy. This is about democracy. If you were upset by January 6th, then you need to factor that into your vote choice. This is not something that's over. This is a dispute and a fight that's continuing. If you're a Republican who is, I think he used the word mainstream a lot as he was speaking, if you think of yourself as someone who's in the mainstream of the Republican Party, then you need to factor this question of preserving American democracy into your decision this fall.
So how do you think that message will land with that group?
That's a really good question. A lot of folks in that group did vote for Biden in 2020. I think the hope is that this message made explicit, combined with Donald Trump's recent legal problems that are probably only going to get worse between now and the election, will help shake some of these folks loose. Maybe not enough to give the Democrats landslide victories or even help them hold on to the House, but to make differences in a lot of close Senate elections, to make differences in these elections for state election officials in advance of the 2024 election.
Well, and Biden's personal approval rating has seen a slight increase as of late, especially as there have been some recent successes, particularly around climate change and gun reform. Originally, several months ago, a lot of observers were saying that the midterm elections would be a landslide in favor of the Republicans. Now I'm seeing that kind of shifting a little bit. What's the lay of the land from where you're seated?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think the president's improved approval ratings, his string of legislative successes this fall, have all really changed the game. Plus, you have the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision that struck down Roe v. Wade and cast the question of abortion rights back to the states. All these things, I think, have energized a number of different constituencies that are inclined to vote for Democrats, but don't necessarily always turn out in midterm elections. And so I think the president tonight is hoping that he can sort of catch that wave, encourage people to vote for Democrats, encourage wavering Republicans to think twice about who they're voting for, and hope that stems the losses in the House. If they're incredibly lucky, maybe even retain very narrow control and hold on to or possibly even expand their margins in the Senate.
How about the location of this speech tonight? Because, of course, he started it trying to be a bit poetic there, talking about how this was a return to the birthplace of American democracy while he talks about this fight for democracy. And we also know that Republicans are focusing quite heavily on Pennsylvania as well. So what is all of this telling you about where this race is going to be fought in the midterm election?
Yeah, and this is a site with enormous symbolic importance, enormous psychological importance, but there are also practical political considerations. Pennsylvania has an incredibly crucial governor's race this year between a fairly mainstream Democrat and a Republican who was at the Capitol on January 6th and has all but come out and said, if I'm governor in 2024, no Democrat is going to get Pennsylvania's electoral votes. You also have a key opportunity for Democrats to pick up a Senate seat. You have the race between John Fetterman and Dr. Oz, the TV physician, who's running as a Republican. And that race looks like Democrats have a chance to win there. If they do, that gives them some breathing room in some of these other close races. So, Pennsylvania is, it's not necessarily a state that people think about very often, but it's called the Keystone State. It's the Keystone State for a reason. It's, very often very crucial and very central to American politics.
Well, and speaking of how crucial Pennsylvania is going to be, House Minority Leader Republican Kevin McCarthy also there tonight, right in Biden's hometown, in fact, of Scranton. And he was the one who was providing the pre-buttal, in fact, because it came before Biden's speech. And I want to play a clip of what he had to say.
This is the record of Joe Biden. This is the record of a Democrat control in Washington. You, the American people, understand this. They want to revive the can-do spirit that this country is founded on. Yet instead of trying to bring our country together to solve these challenges, President Biden has chosen to divide, demean, and disparage his fellow Americans. Why? Simply because they disagree with his policies. That is not leadership.
So we're hearing there from the House Minority Leader, Republican. What do you think of those specific comments, especially as he hammers home on how he feels that Biden is dividing America? Well, we just heard from the president saying that he's trying to unite people to vote out this extreme wing of the Republican MAGA part of the Republican Party. What do you think of how those two narratives are going to hit the American public?
Yeah, I think what we saw from Leader McCarthy is very much what we've been hearing from Republicans since about late January of 2021, trying to downplay January 6th, trying to say, well, these are just differences of opinion, as if we were talking about, I like pepperoni on pizza and you like onions on pizza. That's actually not what's going on. You've got a substantial chunk of Americans in the Republican Party who have chosen to embrace violence. You have someone in the person of Donald Trump who encouraged that violence, who told people to come to Washington on January 6th, who said it's going to be wild, and if you stand up for what's right, we'll undo the results of this election. And Republicans have really tried to avoid having to grapple with that fact and grapple with what that means. And so from the perspective of a lot of Republican leaders, they don't want to talk about this. They don't want to engage this election on the terms of, do you stand with Trump or not? They want this election to be about inflation. They want this to be about gas prices. They want this to be about just the general grumpiness of a lot of Americans in the ongoing aftermath of the COVID pandemic. And every time Donald Trump gets raided, every time Donald Trump gives a talk, every time Donald Trump makes a statement on his social network, that changes the conversation from one that's about inflation, one that's about gas prices, to one that is about the issues that President Biden was talking about tonight. And I think that's it just demonstrates the dilemma that party finds themselves in.
All right, Chris. Well, so much to unpack with this major speech tonight in prime time, but thank you so much for helping us to dissect it just a little bit more. Thanks
for having me. Thank you.
Chris Galdieri is a politics professor at Saint Anselm College, and you can stay with us right here on CBC News Network. We'll be right back.